Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. I just want to apologise for not having made a live feed last night. I got held up with some family business, so wasn't able to do so. But I'm hoping that today we might be able to have a conversation about something that I think is pretty important and that impacts all of us right at this moment. And that is how our children are bearing up to lockdown. The primary issue for me is about how we're dealing with lockdown as adults and how that impacts our children, for those of us that are in Victoria and Queensland and New South Wales in particular. So if you're in either of those states and you're having experiences in relation to the way you're managing lockdown and how that's working out for your kids, we'd be more than happy to hear how that is for you. And one of the reasons for that is that our understanding is that there are a lot of children who experience mental wellbeing issues as a result of being locked at home, not being able to associate with their friends, and with parents who often may not be dealing with lockdown very well either. And we wanted this opportunity to have a conversation with you about how that's impacting you and whether you have any suggestions that you think might be particularly helpful for other people to discuss. So I'm hoping that some of you will get online, talk a little bit about those experiences, and we could have a conversation about them with you as well. Now, there has been a lot of conversations recently about the virus in terms of who should be getting the jab. We know that anyone over 60, fortunately, my category, are encouraged to get the jab. But one of the things that we're noticing, particularly at the moment, is the number of young people who are becoming infectious with COVID-19. Now, this has become a particular concern primarily because with the other degrees of variants, COVID virus variants, the alpha strain and so on, there hasn't been the impact on children as there appears to be right now. Now, this places us into a certain quandary, I think. There are those people that believe that vaccination is important and that all children should be vaccinated. And there's the other side of that spectrum, I guess, which is about people who think, and they're entitled to this belief clearly, that vaccinations do not work, that it's a plot by some other pharmaceutical companies, by governments, in order to control us. Now, whether you want to believe that or not, I think the data tells us quite clearly that vaccinations are something that is going to save lives, prevent hospitalisations, and minimise the effect of COVID-19 and hopefully less deaths, obviously. So one of the issues that I think we're confronting now is how do we combat the beliefs that there might be around vaccinations, and whether or not in general we believe that we are keeping our children safe. Now, this is important to us. My experience working within child protection is that there have been occasions where the department has removed children from their families when they believe they're not receiving the appropriate medical care. And I'm just wondering how some of you might think that if the department decided to take away your child because you had chosen, for whatever reason, and I'm not judging it, whether or not you have had your child removed because they have not been vaccinated. And what does it mean to a child mentally to know that they haven't been vaccinated when all their friends and others may have been? Does that create for them a sense of insecurity, a sense of wondering, why is it that I'm not vaccinated when all these other kids around me have been? I can remember when I was young that it must have been about 6 or 7, I think, and all the kids in my class were vaccinated, but I had a religious exemption. I'm not going into that, but I did have a religious exemption by my parents. And I felt pretty good about that because they all came back crying and upset because they'd had the jab and I hadn't. So I felt rather special. But when we're faced with, but today is different. There's a number of issues here. Number one, there was a time when we didn't question whether or not the jab was important or not. We just simply I suppose, as some people are saying now, we were like sheep. We just followed everybody else, and we did what we were told. And today, though, we're a little bit more resistant to that. I mean, social media enables us to hear other people's point of view, and sometimes those views will determine how it is that we tend to want to respond. We feel comfortable with those different views, and we know there's a lot of other people now who are feeling the same way. We're not as isolated in that sense as we normally would be, and so we choose to settle upon a certain set of views. But the issue around kids is important. This is what the Child Protection Party is about. We're here to protect our children. So what position do we take if we want to protect kids from becoming infected, not only their infection affecting them, but that infection also affecting other people around them? So, should kids go to school? Should they be masked? Should they all get vaccinated before they go to school? Should all teachers be vaccinated before they teach in class? These are kind of different set of rules and understandings now that we didn't have before. They didn't seem to be that important. But because the nature of this virus is relatively deadly, even though when I reflect back on polio, I wasn't around at that time, that was just before I was born, but polio, which certainly I knew of a number of kids that did have polio, that were clearly older than I was, but they were affected and had to wear calipers and other things in order to steady themselves. I remember that, but I don't remember, obviously, the Spanish flu. But there again, there were times when it was important to understand that vaccinations were a way out of a problem, and we tended to accept it. These days we don't. We question it. But the point for me, though, is that the whole idea, the whole notion here is about focusing on what is in the child's best interest. So we might hold one view that may prevent children from being vaccinated. But does that mean then that that is a protective mechanism that we're going to use in order to safeguard our children? I think that we need to think clearly about the impact of any decision we as parents may make on kids. And it also puts into place another area that we need to think about. And I think that is that if an organisation such as Department of Child Protection or Child Protection Services in general, if they choose to make a decision about what is in the child's best interest and we object to it, how is that objection going to be met? What can we do to meet that particular issue? And we have lots of those cases anyway. We have cases where parents are objecting to the religious school perhaps that a kid might be going to because they themselves are atheists. They may object to certain medication that a child has been prescribed, and we as parents may object to that. And as a parent who is concerned about the impact of a vaccine, for example, on kids, how do they get their voice heard amongst the clamour and all the noise that sits around the need for vaccinations? So I think these are really important issues that we need to start to tackle. And then on top of all of that, we've got the mental well-being of children. So how are we confronting the mental well-being of kids? How are we monitoring that? And what services are we providing? Now, I've talked many occasions about types of the approach to the mental well-being of children and adolescents. And I've said many times that the type of services that are provided for most kids is inadequate. There's very little funding, not much consideration given to the type of therapy that is required for children, and certainly there's very little in terms of the actual practice and the type of practitioners that are practicing in that field. So there's lots of work to be doing there, and we now have got a situation where the mental well-being of children is probably at the worst that it has ever been. And there's some stats, I haven't got them here to talk about tonight, but there are some stats that do raise the issue around how it is that we are, the increase, I should say, in the number of kids that are impacted by the coronavirus, being locked down. What does that mean to them? The lack of socialisation that's taking place as a result. Kids sometimes being even more locked up in their room playing computer games because they can't get out and do other things. The locking down of sporting activities that kids can no longer be involved in. All those things are going to impact how children are thinking about themselves. And it's also an opportunity, unfortunately, for those people who use social media to bully children to continue to do that in a way which is probably more damaging, because children become more vulnerable when they're confronted with this type of situation. So I'd be interested to know on what you think. So Leslie says, and we've only got the one post, so thanks. I didn't expect to get all that many tonight, given that it was a Monday night, and I normally do it on a Sunday night, and Sunday nights usually we have lots of people getting to us. So she says, I'm 68 and not coping, so what hope for children trying to cope? It must be terrifying for them. And I think, if children, and I agree, Leslie, and thanks for posting that, I think it's really important to understand that as parents, are we aware of what's happening for our children at this particular time? Are we so caught up in what's happening for us because we ourselves are stressed and worried? Do we forget about what's happening for them? Do we believe that because a child is a certain age, perhaps it may be difficult to conduct a reasonable conversation with that child to talk about their experiences, to be able to find language that will help you to elicit sort of the type of responses that we might need to know where that child is at that particular time? So these are things I think that we as parents need to be thinking about. Now, the other point too for me is that there are lots of kids who are in care who are unhappy, obviously, being in care and separated from their parents. They're already experiencing a trauma as a result of that. So how are they experiencing this additional layer, this additional trauma on top of that? And how many parents, as a result, are not able to see their kids because the kids have been locked away in these homes, residential care facilities, whatever, but they're unable to see their parents. So how's that affecting those relationships? I know that when we had a lockdown in February last year, when most of the country was locked down, there were many parents complaining that they were not able to see their kids. I had someone who saw me today, actually, who told me that during that period, they had little time to see their child, and that was eventually used against them. Didn't have anything to do with them. It was a virus, and it was a government decision. But they found that they were disadvantaged because they had a newborn baby at that time who was taken from them soon after birth, and they didn't have a chance to connect with that child because they were locked down. So how are we dealing with that? Like how are parents advocating for things to be different during a lockdown so those connections with their kids are maintained? And what is the department doing in order to ensure that those relationships are also maintained? Or is it an opportunity for department workers to do less work because they don't have to transport kids from A to B? Or is it an opportunity for them simply to justify their decision by ensuring that the children are separated from these terrible parents and that they can then go off and do other stuff apart from monitoring and transporting in relation to access? So what sort of impact is it having on you? Diana says here, the department is keeping my son from me even though I still have parental rights. I haven't seen him in a month. How do they get away with causing the damage both to my son and myself? Diane, I think that's a perpetual question. How does the department get away with any of this? And they do, because to the large extent where most people are quiet about it. I like to think that one of the things that we do at CPP pretty well is to provide the opportunity for people like you, Diane and Leslie and others, to talk about what's been happening for them, to have a voice. I mean, if we have a voice and we can talk about it, then we at least are, I guess, getting out what it is that we think. The more and more people, though, that have this voice and can convey this, the better it is, because the louder the voices are, the more likely you get attention. So we would encourage people to talk about what's been happening to them in relation to their experience. Because sometimes it's good just to have that conversation. Now, there are lots of tremendous support groups around who are prepared to have those conversations. We've got one, we've got a number actually through CPP, and there's a number of other avenues by which you can have that conversation. And we also provide the opportunity for you to come along to one of our live feeds and have a conversation with us about what's happening for you as well, so that you can get your views out there. One of the things, though, that I guess I noticed the most, and I think this is, if I was to boil down what's the biggest problem around child protection generally, and why isn't it that more parents don't have kids returned to them? And I firmly believe this, and it hit home when I was talking to a client recently about her experience. The number of people that contact CPP and other organisations and other advocacy organisations, the number of people that contact them late in the process devastates me. I was speaking to someone today who contacted us for the first time, and she spoke about not understanding what happens within the process and having children removed and how traumatic that was for her, and that she was completely blamed by the department. And we know what that story is like because it happens all the time. And then what does she do then? Like, if you don't have the information, she expected never to be involved with Department of Child Protection. She thought they were there to help her, and she discovered that wasn't the case. That's another issue. How come that's always the case? She had to go off and find the services and other things that she wanted to do. But the kids have gone to a GOM 18 simply because she didn't have enough information. So we need to be able to find ways to access people at the beginning, because my belief is that if we can start to work with people right at the beginning of the process, there's a better chance of producing a better outcome. I think that you increase the percentage and the possibilities somewhere between 40 and 50% of having your kids returned to you if you start dealing with the issues as to why the children were removed in the first instance. And it was really interesting when I started to question as to, what happens, what was the reason. She gave a reason, and then I found out there are other factors involved, all of which were quite manageable, and all of which meant she could have, if she addressed all of them in the appropriate way, could have had her child returned to her. But I think that's a fact. I think the fact that we address some of these issues too late, that it creates a situation in which you're never going to win. And I think I just want to come back to children in lockdown and mental wellbeing issues. I think also that one of the primary problems is that we get so involved in our own stuff that we often forget that, like, we tend to think kids are resilient for some particular reason, and they're not as resilient as we would like to think they are, and that they're struggling with stuff, but we don't address that. We wait. It's a bit like people coming looking for help. Once their kids are removed, they wait too late. And sometimes we wait far too late to address the issues that are impacting a child's mental well-being. And we need to find ways to address those issues much earlier. And so it's about, I guess, being aware of the problem, and the problem being COVID, lockdowns, isolation, separation from social contacts, and then think about, well, okay, that's what's happening. Now, how are people in my world experiencing all of that? I know that personally, personally, that is my own personal experience. I know that there's a part of myself, being 70, that is feeling vulnerable around the virus. Now, I go for my second jab next Friday. This coming Friday rather, and I know that once I have that, I'm going to feel a little bit more protected, I guess. I know that I can still contract the virus, I know that I can still become unwell and so on, but it is a lingering concern for me, and I wonder, how is that lingering concern for other people in my life, my other children, my partner and my other children? We have conversations about that, because it is important to find a way to understand where everybody else is thinking. Not everybody thinks the same that you do. Some people are dealing with it very, very well. Other people are extremely concerned. And for some people, it's building a sense of anxiety and stress. And we can imagine that if it's building that anxiety and stress in a household, because the parents are thinking that way, I can guarantee you that the kids are experiencing the same. And so we need to find a way to address all of those issues, not be blind to them, accept that they're out there, but just to work out in our circle, how are we dealing with and managing all of that. And I just want to mention that we're sending this to YouTube, so there'll be people watching us on YouTube and on Twitch. So I'm just asking you to subscribe, if you would, to this. Predictably, no one's on YouTube at the moment, such is life. But if you want to subscribe, subscribe, and ring the bell if you're on YouTube. So I'll just go through some of I'm not fearful of the virus, but I am very concerned about everyone's mental health. Thanks, Leslie. And I think, so am I. And I think we should be concerned. It's like, we have that day where we say, you okay? Around the virus, every day, I think we should be asking people if they're okay. Every day is an okay day. Are you okay? And to seek some form of acknowledgement from people that they're functioning okay. And always remember that there will be people in your life who will always respond by saying, yeah, I'm okay. And actually, deep down, we know, say, well, how are you dealing with the virus? Do you have any fears or whatever about what's happening to you at the moment? How are your kids coping around all of this? Have you asked them how they're coping, right? And that sort of stuff, and what sort of fears are generated by the virus. So Leslie, that's a really good point. If you're not afraid of the virus yourself, then think about how other people may be responding to that. If you don't believe in the vaccine, fine, but don't assume that that's a message you need to convey to everybody, right? Because I think, is it fair if you're thinking the vaccine has all these other things happening for it that are unhelpful, or the vaccine itself is poisonous, what some people are saying, but there's other people around just fearful about getting sick. By us talking about the vaccine and how unhelpful it is, and when that's a conversation they don't want to hear, they just want to hear, well, how do I get through this, and when do I get the vaccine, and how can I deal with it? They've got a different set of issues to the one that you're trying to impose upon them. So it's really important to be wary of where people are at. Not everybody's there. And why do we have to try and convince people that our version of what is happening is right? I don't want to convince people that having the vaccine is a good thing. It's a good thing for me. But if you choose not to have it, then that's your choice. But is that an appropriate choice for you to make in relation to your children? That's the other question I'm asking. So we're thinking just about ourselves or not. Diane Fitz says, I've been trying to find a social worker to help me with them, but have absolutely no luck where I am. Diane, where are you? Just tell us. So Diane says, she says in an earlier post, the department is keeping my son from me, even though I still have potential rights. I haven't seen him in a month. How do they get away with causing the damage both of my son and myself? Just a matter of nuance. If the department, once the department removes a child, your rights are gone. And this is a great fallacy of the system, and it's certainly something that we are trying to have corrected. If there are parents who are pretty crappy, I get all of that, and probably shouldn't be parents anyway. The majority, though, aren't that way really, and that they need to know that their rights to meet with their kids, their rights to advocate about their situation, their rights to have a legal process that's respectful and one that gives them a voice, they are their rights. They are the children's rights as well. And unfortunately, within this system, those rights are not necessarily adhered to. In fact, often they're dismissed. And they should not be dismissed by social workers, because that should not be the case. And Diane's on Gold Coast. And I know you've just come out of lockdown, I think, Diane. So I hope things are working out for you there. We haven't got... I might send you some information in relation to, I think, the Family Inclusion Networks in the Gold Coast, and there might be somebody there that you can speak to. But you're certainly more than welcome to call us at CPP, Diane, and talk in greater detail about your situation so that we can perhaps work with you to help you to improve whatever is happening. The best thing I think anybody can do is find an advocate, someone that can go with you to meetings, represent you, listen to what's being said, because we know that when things are being said in those meetings, normally the parent's quite emotional, and when you're emotional, sometimes you don't pick up some of the things that are said, and sometimes the people on the other side of the fence, the social workers, will say things that are inappropriate to you, and they either go over your head or they cause an emotional response. So to have a third person there taking notes and talking with you about what's happened is really helpful, and where possible, get an advocate involved. I'll just go through some more. Tracy, good to see you on board. She's sent a WhatsApp chat. Thanks, Tracy, for sending that. If the parent don't get... I'm concerned the department will say it's lack of responsibility as a parent if the parent don't get the vaccine. I think that's probably on the cards. Now, I'm not arguing either way right here. I'm just saying that they do tend to put forward the argument that if you're not receiving their version of what is the appropriate medical treatment, you will be penalised for that. So if you're an anti-vaxxer and you're thinking that you're not vaccinating your children, so when they raise that as an issue, firstly, don't let them know that it's an issue for you. I don't think that's helpful. Why have that debate with them? Besides, the child, if the child's in their care, it's their duty to make a decision about what it is that should be done in relation to vaccinating that child. I know that there have been many cases we've dealt with where families have wanted to have measles vaccinations and a whole host of other childhood type vaccinations, and they've been very angry that the department haven't done it in the time frame that's supposed to be implemented for those particular kids. So whether they do it or not, it's basically up to them. If you want to object to them vaccinating your child, I would suggest you hold back on those objections, because the department are likely to think in unhelpful ways, I guess, about the decisions that you might make in that. Michael says, I had the Child Protection Police tell me my disabled children did not deserve government-funded disability services. That's one of the excuses for not looking into the false evidence from docs. And I know that Michael's kids certainly needed disability funding. I think Michael now has that through NDIS, so that's good to hear though, Michael. But and Ross has said the dollars would be better spent with supporting the family rather than spending the dollars in removing the children. And Ross, at the end of the day, that's a no-brainer, but it's true. And that's, yeah, so... and there's a continuing issue which I've talked about endlessly about providing appropriate amount of money. Michael says, how would the lawyers survive if that was the case? This is true, because the industry is about not just DCP workers, it's about lawyers and the organisations itself, the NGOs, that all earn money off the back of of removing children. So we certainly know that, and that needs to be something that we need to deal with as well and be honest about it. So look, thanks everybody for getting on board. There haven't been all that many tonight, but I hope that more people will join with us later. But thanks for being on board. I just want people to think about caring for kids. This is the issue, and I can't stress this enough. How are we in these particular COVID times caring for kids? Are we so involved in our own stuff that we're ignoring what's happening to our kids? it's important to be able to ask them questions, whether they're in care or not. How are they coping with COVID-19, with any lockdowns that they've experienced? What are they doing that's different? They've got some creative ways of entertaining themselves apart from gluing themselves to the television set. And if they are, there are any interesting shows that they're watching that they haven't watched before. So what are they doing? And what signs could you be looking for that would indicate that your kids are not coping as they would? So how is their behaviour changed? Are they more excluding themselves? Are they spending more time in their room than what they normally would? Are they having less conversations with you? Are they irritable? Are they aggressive, angry? How are they behaving that would make you think that they're struggling? And if they are struggling, then find some help for them, right? There are many accredited mental health social workers and psychologists that work with kids that are out there. If you're in this lockdown situation and a kid needs help, there's telehealth services, there's internet services, there's a whole host of services now that are available. I do lots of my own work via the internet and catching up with people over Messenger and video conferencing people and using MS Teams and whatever. So there's many ways that we can connect that are helpful. And if you want to connect with me and have a conversation with me about what's happening to you, we can connect through MS Teams or Messenger also. So there's ways by which we can have these conversations even if we can't meet on a face-to-face basis. So think of those things for your kids. What services are available for kids as well. So thanks everybody for being with me. I know that it wasn't a riveting conversation in terms of some of the things we normally talk about here at CPP, but I just want to encourage people to subscribe to our YouTube page and also to do what you can in order to become an active member of Child Protection Party so that we can make the difference, so that we can impact legislation and decisions that are going to impact you and your access to your kids. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourself, and more importantly, be safe.